Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we will begin the panel discussion, Securing Development, How to Accelerate a Trusted and Secured Global Development. Please welcome our panelists. Mohamed bin Amor, Secretary-General, Arab ICT Organization. Rodney Taylor, Secretary-General, Caribbean Telecommunications Union. John Omo, Secretary-General, African Telecommunication Union. Masanori Kondo, Secretary-General, Asia Pacific Telecommunity. And our moderator, Sasha Qadri, journalist and moderator.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session on securing development. I have an esteemed panel with me today. Maybe just to kick it off, I could just briefly go around the group and you could all just do a very brief introduction, your role and your remit. And let me just remind you to hold the microphone super close to your mouth. Masanori, maybe I can start with you.
Okay, I'm Masanori Kondo, of Secretary-General of Asia Pacific Telecommunity, which locates in Bangkok, Thailand, and established back in 1979, more than 40 years old. And we have more than 38 member countries and affiliate members, which is private companies, so ICT members. So our purpose is basically to support our ICT development in the region.
Thank you so much. John, welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is John Omo. I'm the Secretary-General of the African Telecommunications Union. We are a union of both the member states of Africa, 48 of them, and indeed the private sector, 56 of them. And so we deal with ICT, coordination of ICT programs and projects in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you as well. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Rodney Taylor, Secretary-General of the Caribbean Telecommunications Union based in the beautiful Caribbean. And we have 20 member states in the Caribbean. And like my colleagues here, we represent the interests of our member states in promoting ICT-enabled development. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mohamed bin Amor. I'm the Secretary-General of the Arab ICT Organization. Our headquarters is based in Tunis. We started effectively working since 2008, and we represent almost 22 Arab countries. Thank you for bringing us as a regional organization, and I think this is an innovation to bring all of us here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mohamed, if you can also hold your microphone closer to your mouth, that would be
okay.
Super. Thank you. So thank you all so much. Let's just break down the title here. When we talk about securing development, what do we mean? And what comes to mind as the main priority for developing countries? Whoever would like to jump in, go for it. John, I think you do.
Thank you very much. Securing development essentially recognizes that ICT is what weaves all aspects of our development, be it agriculture, be it health, be it education, be it manufacturing. All facets of our development cycle are now interwoven so much by ICTs that we then need to ensure that there's sufficient trust, there's sufficient security in our ICT systems and services, so much so that these aspects of our development are not compromised and then can interoperate with each other in terms of operability and also in terms of security. And so securing development essentially is creating sufficient trust and sufficient security in our ICT systems and services.
Thank you. Anyone want to add to that, Rodney?
Sure. Thank you, Sasha. So ICT-enabled development is what we promote, and you'll notice that, for example, the ITU has an objective of connecting the unconnected. There's still about 3 billion people in the world without internet access. And so we have some very ambitious targets around connecting those unconnected to provide economic opportunities, opportunities for education, opportunities to earn a livelihood. And therefore, as we push towards connecting the unconnected and driving ICT-enabled development, it is very important that security underpins all of that, because then we are setting ourselves up for failure if there's no public confidence and trust in the systems that we establish to promote development.
Thank you. Mohamed, did you want to add anything?
For me, the first thing that it comes to my mind is about SDGs. Today we are almost 7 years to 2030, which is the date to achieve these goals. And I think that today we are a little bit far from these goals. And there is two things. One is in favor and sometimes it's against. The thing which is in favor, ICTs, and what we have seen recent years about this fourth digital revolution, which create a lot of tools which are able to accelerate and boost how to achieve these goals. But the second thing was COVID. It's against reaching these goals. And I think that the good thing for the COVID pandemic was the rise of the importance of the ICTs, and we need to build on that in order to use ICTs and digital transformation in order to achieve digital goals.
Thank you. Masanori, did you want to add anything?
Okay, thank you, Sasha. Maybe I would like to approach from different aspect, which is not like a detail, like items or substance of what is securing development, rather how, as a APT, consider our activities. So cybersecurity as a whole is so many items or so many agendas. So first of all, we have to identify or draw a big picture. What is like a cybersecurity, and what is a point we have to focus on specific activities. For instance, setting the agenda is important, or whether it is, for instance, what's going on the business side or technology side, or rather capacity building is could be a priority for our members. So as such, first thing is what we will do. We usually do is to identify what is a priority and what is the agenda for them, and then we can consider how we plan and in what sense our members needs to secure their development, ICT development.
Mm-hmm. Rodney, you made a point about the fact that cybersecurity needs to underpin a lot of the work that you do, and I'd like to come back to that. But before we go to that, I'd like to ask, to what extent do you feel that this conversation should touch upon the unequal development when it comes to funding? Is funding an issue in developing countries?
Well, yes, it is. And I would certainly say it is from where I stand, from small island developing states in particular with limited resources. So funding to invest in the infrastructure, funding to develop the necessary skills. We've been hearing for the past 2 days about the shortage, for example, in cybersecurity skills. And that shortage is felt most acutely in developing countries. And therefore, funding to build the infrastructure, to develop the skills, to provide the platforms is an issue. There are international financial institutions that do provide funding, but that funding does come at a cost. And therefore, yes, funding is an issue. And certainly I would recommend that to address the issue of funding, that perhaps you can look at international cooperation, technical assistance, and so on that would help developing countries. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. John, come in.
I'd like just to follow up on what Rodney has said, that a lot of multilateral cooperation and indeed funding that is associated with it comes at a cost, and it comes to my mind that there's then a fundamental problem here, that much of our cooperation is still underpinned by aspects of our state sovereignty, aspects of too much of commercial interests, and the perception that if I can, secure that which is within my borders, then I'm okay. But I think the transboundary nature of the issues that we are dealing with are such that the strongest point is only as strong as the weakest point. And so if there is that much of a problem in our developing countries, and indeed we see a problem of skills gap largely, we see a problem of systems not being adequately secured, we see a problem of a lack of policy frameworks and indeed institutional systems that can support cybersecurity, then the global cybersecurity systems are only as strong as there's weak systems in developing countries. And so I think cooperation needs to be underpinned on the notion that financing may be at a cost, but at what cost to the global system? And so I think there needs to be cooperation in such a way that there's a lot more of support rather than attaching so much of cost associated, of course, with the notion of sovereignty, of course, commercial interest. And so we need to see a lot more of financial flows, support, technical skills, development in developing countries from those countries that are already enabled to deal with cybersecurity. Thank you.
You agree, Masanori?
Yeah, if I may. So usually, before we go to the issue of funding, as I said, what we usually need to do is to identify what is the issue, because some country, for instance, may not have a cybersecurity national strategy, or maybe they need to update it. Then, and also some countries are considering to put the legislation for legislation or new laws or regulation for cybersecurity. But some countries may require more in the field of capacity building, awareness of high officials to the general workers and so on. So first, we try to identify those issues or agenda, we call it agenda, then we try to find funding resources. So in such a way, our mindset is not starting from funding, but rather what is our activities to be done, then try to find out what could be the financial resources. Because there are many available funding resources. Of course, you have to explain it, your necessity, but I think the order or steps is that first we have to identify the issue to do.
And does this funding specifically have a component that addresses cybersecurity?
Well, if you are aware that of the importance of cybersecurity, yes, the funding, and I've seen certainly in the Caribbean where there's World Bank funding, for example, or the Inter-American Development Bank from my part of the world, which provides funding. There have been components on digital transformation projects where there's a focus on cybersecurity, and it does include development of the right legislative frameworks, the building of institutional capacity, the training, development of skills, and the provision of infrastructure, things like certs, etc. So it starts with awareness, and that's why forums like these are so important, and the discussion has been very rich over the last 2 days because it brings to the fore the multifaceted issues around cybersecurity and the importance to national development.
And my point of view is that we were working very hard last time in order to convince funding institutions and development institutions in order to register the importance of ICTs in their program and projects. And now, with this rise of importance of cybersecurity, it's time also to work on that. But till now, if we look to any development institutions or funding institutions, we will not find anywhere the word cybersecurity in their plan so there is a lot of work in order to convince funding institutions in order to put the cybersecurity between their priorities.
Oh, that's so interesting. John, go ahead.
No, I think there's a bank that gives money for free is probably in the wrong business. Let's admit it. Whether the so-called, multilateral lending institutions. And so I think as my colleague from APT says, we in the developing world must also come up with bankable projects.
Yeah.
Projects that will attract funding and funding that is sustainable. The projects must themselves be sustainable and have a commercial interest that then attracts lending. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to develop bankable projects for purposes of attracting lending from various financial institutions or grants for that matter.
Maybe I want to add one thing. interestingly, even we have been talking about the cybersecurity for decades, the importance of cybersecurity, and we suppose that everyone knows. But actually, if you and also the degree of cybersecurity of what required is getting higher and higher. So the interesting story for us or among APT is that if you ask government high officials whether cybersecurity is important and you know about the cybersecurity or not, the answer is yes. But we tried a kind of test, like a anonymous test to those high-level officials, sending an email, and please click this link because of blah, blah, blah.
The phishing email.
Yeah. Then, actually, many of them click it. So even though you know the importance of cybersecurity, it's just an example. Then once you experience that you are kind of so much vulnerable to those cyber attacks, then those high officials start to seriously consider how to finance or allocate their budget to the security. So the personal experience is also, and awareness is also important.
Absolutely. Are any of you worried about funding maybe being cut because of what's happening in the global economy? Is that something on the radar, Mohamed?
Let's say that today we are seeing development of cybersecurity market, and this is something which we need to deal with. So there is many opportunities today to invest in startups who are working for cybersecurity tools, and something we can attract many investors that are interested in the cybersecurity market. Today, the amount of cybersecurity budget is getting higher and higher, and we expect that around 2025, this number would be around $10 trillion per year worldwide, and this number is very important to attract all stakeholders in order to enter this market.
Can I also add to that certainly there's been a fallout in revenue from the COVID pandemic for many developing countries. In the Caribbean, many economies are based on tourism. That was practically closed. And so I agree with John that banks will always have money to lend. The ability to repay those loans, however, is a whole totally different question. And many developing countries are heavily indebted as a result of the loss of revenue from things like tourism and so on during the global pandemic. So the ability to repay these loans, I think, is an issue for many developing countries that are already heavily indebted. ICT is in the scope of things may not be as high as the provision of road infrastructure or water or healthcare, but it underpins all of these sectors, and so it is a question of prioritizing. And I will still suggest that there perhaps needs to be even greater emphasis on multilateral cooperation and technical assistance beyond just the funding and borrowing of money from financial institutions.
John.
Yeah, again, I'd say that a bank that gives out money for free is in the wrong business. But I think we need to realize that there's a lot of charitable work that is required in this sphere. And so much of our financial institutions, private companies, need to develop funds for this particular industry because I mean, if your systems are attacked, you are going to spend perhaps a lot more.
Yeah.
So I would look forward to opportunities such as a global cybersecurity fund, where organizations donate money, and that can be helped to secure systems, especially where vulnerabilities are recognized as present, or skills gaps, like mostly in developing countries. And then, of course, from the developing world, we also come up with projects that are bankable, that are fundable, for purposes of ensuring that the networks are secure.
just to touch on one of the points that you made, Rodney, how much knowledge sharing is there between developed and developing countries, with the aim of leveling the playing field? And to your point that you're only as strong as your weakest link. So really it's in everyone's best interest.
Yes, certainly. There's a significant knowledge sharing that happens certainly within multilateral institutions like the ITU, for example. ITU provides a wealth of knowledge, opportunities to network and interface with global experts. Within the Americas, there's also the Organization of American States that provides support in terms of development of national cybersecurity strategies. And certainly, I'm sure that countries like Saudi Arabia would be more than willing to share its expertise, having come such a far way in a short space of time. So coming out of this, I certainly would be reaching out to Saudi Arabia and other countries that are ranked highly, because it took certainly a concerted effort and a clear strategy in order to be able to achieve so much in a short space of time.
Absolutely. Yes.
Let's say that when looking to global cybersecurity index, the major lacks for developing countries is around human capacities. So in order to help and assist developing countries, there is a lot of efforts to do in order to develop their human resources capacities. And allow me in this point to answer my brother from the African Union and to say for the projects for human resources building capacities, the projects are not bankable. And banks has already the responsibility to have what we call societal responsibilities. And under this line, we need a lot of efforts in order to build human resources capacities.
Okay. I have a follow-up question to that, though, because I think one of you indicated when we spoke before this conversation that actually international cooperation is rather sluggish despite the magnitude of the cybersecurity threat. Why is that, and how can that change? John.
Thank you very much. Yes. I think, as we heard yesterday, diplomacy multilateralism is predicated on diplomacy, the ability to sit down and discuss and negotiate issues. Diplomacy, as we heard yesterday, is based on giving as little as is possible and extracting as much as you possibly can. Now, for organizations where I've been involved, and unfortunately I've seen this quite a bit in the last 20 years that we've been discussing cybersecurity, there's a lot of brinkmanship. And the challenge is laced with, unfortunately, again, a lot of private sector interests that then clouds the debate quite a bit. And so I think there are, countries that, think of themselves, unfortunately, as cyber sovereign, and that then, takes the issue away from what it should really be, that it's only one network. The internet is one network. Ideally, it should be one network. And so you can't divide portions of it into national jurisdictions and international jurisdictions. So much so that, again, if one part of the network in Saudi Arabia, as an example, is weak, then the system in Iraq or Iran or Russia, US is weak. And so I think we need to see less and less of brinkmanship at the international plane. I have seen quite a bit of that, and less of private sector interest. I think the other challenge that I've seen, again, comes from the nature in which the ecosystem developed. That is the suspicion between industry, the private sector industry, and governments. And again, fortunately for us, the internet developed in an ecosystem of freedom. And governments have been seen as, adding bureaucratic layers into the system. I think governments, if I went out here and committed a crime, if a civilian comes to me to say, this is wrong, as opposed to a policeman, I most likely will respond a lot more favorably to the policeman rather than the civilian. So I think governments have the force of law behind them, the force of enforcement, the ability to enforce that which they talk about, and that's the reason we entrust them with, in our election systems, we entrust them with governance. And so I think there needs to be a lot more trust between industry and government, which I see quite lacking in the sort of multilateral atmosphere where these negotiations are. And so trust between industry and government, and not to see, I've seen a lot of government bashing as if government is the problem. I don't think that is the case. I think there needs to be a lot more respect in terms of us as humans, because it affects us first as humans. Cybersecurity affects us first as humans. And so any divide between industry and governments is false. Yeah. Governments is as much a stakeholder in the ecosystem as any other person. And so I think we need to see a lot more of dialogue between government and industry. Thank you.
So still much work to be done. We have 2 minutes. A final thought, Masanori.
Okay, thank you, Sasha. Actually, I quite agree with what John said. And but so my observation is that international and multi-stakeholders cooperation is, I think, doing well. But we can improve it further, as you mentioned, or as you pointed out. So the image of the situation is so-called. I usually describe it as a Rubik's cube. I hope you know Rubik's cube. So there are many colors. So in order to identify the issues to be and also who is identified, who are the stakeholders to take responsibility of which dimension is important. So cybersecurity, there are so many various issues. So in one dimension of starting point, there are so many colors in one dimension, and you have to try to coordinate and collaborate to make it in one color. Yeah. So that this color, I'm responsible. The other dimension, you have to take a responsibility. So as such, the international collaboration is to some extent working well to some point, but we need to improve, and we can improve further.
Thank you. So we will close that session with that image of that perfect Rubik's Cube. Thank you all to all my panelists. Thank you.